Hello, and today I'm really glad that you clicked on this video. I'm Dr. Luke, and we have got a very interesting topic, sexuality. Sexuality is such a prevalent term, such a thing that we sometimes don't know what it's about, and I've got a guest with me today, André Webster. Welcome, André.
Thank you,
to have
Dr.
you here.
Luke. Good to be here.
André has been a teacher for many years. He's got a lot of counseling experience, and recently he completed his 3-year degree in sexology. So really glad to have you here. Glad to get some insights on this hot topic and give some knowledge to people. You know, like I always say, because of the lack of knowledge, people perish.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. And I think an understanding of sexuality is so important for society, for our communities, because real leaders need to know how to be responsible with it. And if you look at all the leaders in the world, they're not immune to sexuality issues, bringing them down. So I think if we as communities can really start understanding what it is, how we can be healthy and wholesome in the way that we express it, we can create a solid foundation for communities. Yeah.
Okay, so firstly, let's just a first question. You know, if sexuality is so important part of everything we do and everything we experience, I think we just need to know what it is, because a lot of people hear the name and you know the word sex, you know the word sexuality, you're not sure exactly what the difference is. So can you give us a little bit of clarity on what's the difference between the two?
Okay, so as the word implies, sexuality is a broad term and sex is part of it. Okay? Sex, if we look at dictionary definitions, they tend to say there are two definitions. The first one would be whether you're male or female, so it's got to do with gender. And the second one would be the act of sexual intercourse, or coitus, or as some people say, lovemaking.
Yeah.
So those are the two definitions. Now, sex is part of sexuality, and sexuality is everybody's thinking, beliefs, their actual physical being concerning sex.
Okay.
Okay, so it's a broad term encompassing how we feel, think around sex itself.
If it's such a broad term and you know it's something that we experience every day, how does it affect our being? What does it do to affect that?
Absolutely. So the first thing to realize, and you'll see it in the diagrams that you'll be seeing, sexuality is lifelong, and it includes our whole being. Okay. So sexuality starts in the womb and ends when we die. It includes every part of our being, so I would say that's our physical being, our intellect, our will, our emotions, and our spirit. We understand we're sexual beings right from the time we're conceived, and obviously until we die. So, and that's good to know, because some people think they're too old for sex, but you're never too old. So it's a lifelong thing. It includes every part of our being, as I said. And the other thing is that when we look at the factors that influence sexuality, it helps us to realize why it affects so many things.
Yeah.
So simple things around gender are why do we have certain biological characteristics, and how does that affect gender? You've got the whole hormonal system that affects our gender and how we live that out, and that obviously affects how we think about ourselves. We've got to then go to what do we really believe? And so religion plays a huge role in our sexuality and our expression of it, because depending on how we believe things are and what our Creator gave us, we're going to use it in a certain way. We then obviously have the laws of the land will determine sexuality. So in certain countries, you can do certain things that in others you can't. Hopefully they will always want to protect healthy, wholesome sexuality. We then have education and the whole education system, and that's a big issue in many countries now, you know, with comprehensive sexual education. And so all these things can determine what our sexuality is. Culture is big. There's that wonderful statement, you know, that we can get our grandparents out of our flesh, but not out of our bones. And for some reasons, for some reason, we all have a thinking around sex and sexuality that we don't know where it came from. And we've actually got to start questioning it. We've got to be saying, is that really wholesome? Is it healthy? Because I dare to say a lot isn't.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, so if we go to the workplace, how does it affect us in the workplace?
Yeah, so interestingly, if you look at what's happening in the world, there are just so many people that are falling because of sexual acts, or at the moment, many people are losing their jobs because of pornography that is being watched at work, all those kinds of things. So yes, the actual looking at or the act of sex is causing people to fall. But now you can imagine if sexuality involves my perception of gender.
Yeah.
So now I go into a work environment and I come into that with a cultural perspective or a religious perspective on gender. I'm going to then treat people in my workplace in a certain way. And so that is why it is so important that businesses and workplaces actually consider what is going to be our sexuality stance. Because we all come, you and me, sitting here, we bring an understanding of sexuality that we've never really articulated. And so that becomes very apparent in the workplace. Yeah.
So should a company almost communicate their stance on sexuality for a new employee?
I think it would be helpful. I really do. It would be a new way of thinking. I don't think many would, because, and we'll talk about it later, why it hasn't been spoken about, openly. But I think it's one of the things that would help and probably stop a whole lot of infighting, because the patriarchal thinking where the man is dominant is part of so many people's sexual script.
Yeah.
And that obviously can create havoc in those circumstances.
Yeah, and basic things like, how do we as a company go to the bathroom? And to which bathroom do we go? Do we have one, or do we have two? Do we have,
that's right.
Things that they are talking about nowadays.
Yeah. And it's all because of the factors that determine our sexuality at the end of the day.
If we take that from the workplace into the community, so the broader community, from everything from schools, from education, from where we live in our land, the people we interact with.
Yeah.
How does that affect it?
Oh, it's just so huge. I think for me, the part that is most affected by this is family.
Yeah, for sure.
Because family is obviously our first building block of society and of our community. And so an understanding of what healthy family and healthy sexuality is going to become the building block for future generations. So I would dare to say that sexuality and a healthy understanding of it is going to set up future generations. And that is why it needs to be dealt with. So my understanding of what it means to be a man, a husband, of what it means to have a wife and who she needs to be, of how we think around our sexuality, where we will have it, how we will talk about it in front of our children. My understanding of me as a dad and my children, and how I'll speak to them about their bodies and how they work. Am I going to constantly speak quietly about their sexual parts, or tell them to never talk about them, because that is straight away going to place in them either a positivity or a negativity. The other thing is that we live in a world nowadays that is extremely sexualized. And sexualization says that sex is the answer to everything. So any problem you have, especially emotional, if you can have sex, you're going to be okay. And I think the family needs to start helping children to realize that is not the case.
Yeah. And the access that that children have through media and social media and internet access is obviously, we know, is a big thing. But it probably starts with the parents and what they allow for themselves and what access they allow, whether it be from the internet, from social media, from watching television and certain movies and certain things that can affect their sexuality.
Absolutely. And I think way too many parents have never dared to think about it. And so I think we tend to just allow things into our world without having really thought of the implications. and certainly for the next generation, which is how sexuality can affect communities and families and societies.
So if it's such an important thing that affects so many levels of our lives, why hasn't society spoken about it? Why is it now that we get maybe some extremes and everyone reacts to that, but the healthy part of sexuality is being kept quiet?
Yeah. I think the sad reality is that there is so much shame and guilt related to our sexual parts, the way we feel about them, how we use them, and then how other people perceive us. And it's that shame which we need to address. And for some reason, the sexual act goes very deep. And I would dare to say that it doesn't only affect us physically, it certainly affects us intellectually and emotionally, and I think definitely spiritually.
Yeah, I would say spiritually as well.
And so where there's sexual pain, there's deep brokenness, and brokenness will often cause people to become silent. And so they don't want to speak about it. If something is not spoken about, it can often become more of an issue than if it is spoken about, even in the wrong way.
Yeah, I think, the fact that you mentioned that it is a very deep issue, sexuality, you find that if someone has experienced something sexually impure or which they perceive as wrong, there's such a huge guilt burden that builds up with it, almost more than what you would see with anything else.
That's right. Yeah, and it's a lot of it is because of the silence that is out there. The other thing is that it does go so deep within the person. So I really believe that if we can open up the discussion on sexuality, good education can really remove so much guilt from many people. And I've seen that in counseling, where I've had people come who've been sexually abused or who have been perpetrators. And just having some basic understanding on what the sexual parts are, how they're used, that the fact that a boy can have an erection is something we must celebrate and not feel guilty about, or tell them they're naughty or bad. It can just relieve people of so much guilt. And so help them to then raise others with a healthy ability to look at their sexuality in a good way.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you, so what's going to be the fix? What's going to be the solution to the problem? And as I if I hear correctly, it's a lot to do with healthy communication, but also with someone that is qualified to sit as a neutral person, someone that has got the background to listen to you and not make you feel guilty.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is where the whole comprehensive sexual education curriculum can be problematic, because when it's taken out of the hands of those that really care for the child, so within the hands of the parents, I think it's something that can be used very, very well. And I think it does address real issues. I think every parent, though, needs to look at it and decide what they really believe. And again, we need to then consider our culture. We've got to consider religion. And we've got to be able to speak about it openly from a healthy perspective as a result of what we believe. So in the right hands, I think it's something that is essential for the generations to come. In the wrong hands, it can be extremely destructive.
Almost in conclusion, if I hear correctly, years ago we didn't have internet. We only had books, and you had this situation where someone would pop a little book into a 12 or 13-year-old's hands and say, read this and tell me if you have any questions, and we can talk about it. Nowadays we've got internet, we've got so much access, so it's even more important for a parent to engage at probably a very early age and start introducing little things.
Absolutely. And unfortunately what is being portrayed is an extreme of certain behaviors. And so the child is very unsure of what is natural and what is helpful. And I think parents, we're needing to catch up big time, because we're so far behind what our children are really seeing. So this is a great opportunity, and I think we can see it as positive if we as parents know that we've been positioned over our children to love them and care for them. We are the answer to their problems. whether we find somebody else to meet the need. But certainly in this area, we need to take responsibility.
Yeah, I think, so I think the important thing for all of us to know is that sexuality at this modern day and age needs responsible parenting, responsible guidance. We need to engage with our children, and if we're not sure, get help, get some advice from qualified counselors, so that we can open the discussions, with children from a young age, which is appropriate for their age, and not let them find out from the internet or from friends, and they're not sure what they're dealing with.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Definitely get the communication going a lot quicker than what we would have done it maybe a generation ago.
Absolutely. I think we're forced to now.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, that's wonderful. André, thank you very much. That was a very informative discussion. Maybe we can do a follow-up depending on the questions. So I would encourage you, if you have comments, please leave them down the bottom. Questions, if we can discuss certain things in the future, we'll be really glad to do that. If you think that this is a helpful video that you can maybe share with a friend, feel free to do that. Subscribe so that we can spread the word and make sure that people know what this is about, and that we can open the discussion so that we can really help people that struggle and prevent all these difficult things from developing, prevent children from not being sure how to deal with sexuality. Yeah. Again, thank you for the discussion. It was wonderful having you.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you, Dr. Luke.
Okay. Thank you very much, and remember, stay healthy.